Are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Luscre, Kilo 8 Zulu Tango, and tonight's RATPAC session is Introduction to VHF UHF Contesting, with a little twist, which you'll find out about in a minute here. The main focus of tonight is going to be getting on the air with your tech license, with one opportunity being the ARRL June VHF UHF contest. We'll also talk about some other opportunities to get on the air with your tech license or any other license. As usual, I have a number of links in my slideshow. This PDF will be posted on the RATPAC site, but if you want to, you can shoot the QR code and have access or jot down tiny.cc/VHF-contest. I'll also have that available at the end of the session. Anytime you see this font or one of these symbols, that means that there's a link you can click on in the slideshow. My contact information and my website. So, the focus of tonight's presentation. Although the presentation is about contesting, the focus is not on competition, but instead on the use of contesting as a way to get on the air and make more contacts. Practice operating on VHF, UHF, especially 6 meters, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters using multiple modes. We're also going to be discussing radio equipment and antennas for operating on those bands in these contests. Now, I put this together for a presentation I did earlier this week for another group with 6 ideas to get on the air with your tech license. The first one, of course, is to use repeaters, and we have a video about doing that. 2 meter simplex, which we'll be talking a little bit about tonight. There's a link to tonight's presentation, actually. VHF, UHF contesting, which you're going to be talking about tonight. 10 meters, the only HF band that technicians have voice privileges on. There's a whole link for more information on that, a slideshow on that. We're not going to be covering that tonight. Satellites, information on that with that link. We're not going to be covering that tonight. And the CW privileges that you have as a tech on 80, 40, 15, and 10. And we're not going to be talking about that tonight. So we're going to focus tonight on VHF, UHF contest. Many new hams, especially those focused on ENCOM, have technician class licenses, and that limits you to 10 watt single sideband and all the VHF privileges 50 megahertz and above. For digital capability, you can use 10 meters and VHF and UHF. Please be aware that even though there are CW portions of the band available to technicians on 80, 40, 15, and 10, you cannot operate FT8, FT4 digital with your tech license there. So for VHF and UHF, the only bands operators have privileges to work on all modes and frequencies are the VHF, UHF bands. Although VHF and UHF can include other bands and the microwave bands, we're going to focus on 2 meters and 6 meters because these bands have the most activity in contest. Most new hams have equipment for these bands, including radios and antennas. Activity is focused on 4 weekends of the year, which we'll be talking about. And if you cannot have home antennas, these bands are very easy to cover with portable, mobile, or rover antennas. Let's talk a little bit about contesting. Contesting, also known as radio sport, is a competitive activity pursued by amateur radio operators. Winning a contest is based on the highest total score in a given time period in your given operator's class. How did contesting start? Was intercontinental amateur radio communications became more common in the 1920s, the ARRL had a number of competitions to challenge stations to make as many contacts as possible with stations in other countries. Crossing the Atlantic was so important that these 10 people actually got their names on the cover for getting a contact across the Atlantic. Contests were also formed to provide opportunities for amateur radio operators to practice their message handling skills. It was used for routine or long-distance emergency communication, so messaging handling skills were thought to be very important. The thing we're going to be talking about a little bit later, the exchange that's given in the contact, is a remnant of this idea of message handling. Contesting is a popular activity in amateur radio, but just like amateur radio itself, it's multifaceted activity with different meanings and activities for individual operators. And the two main things we're going to distinguish tonight are competitive versus non-competitive contesting. In competitive contesting, of course, the goal is to win your category, place high in the scores, exceed your previous best score, meeting personal goals, being the best scorer within your group, radio club, circle of friends, etc., so you get bragging rights. But tonight we're going to focus more on non-competitive contesting, where winning is not the main goal. The goal might be something like increasing the number of DXCC countries you have, increasing the number of states you've worked, number of grids you've worked, counties you've worked, etc. Another aspect of non-competitive contesting is testing station equipment, antennas, equipment, etc., and trying out new bands and new modes. Non-competitive contesting is a great training for emergency operations. It improves message handling skills. It can also build skills such as CW and digital modes. Non-competitive contesting is also a great way to have fun working a lot of stations in a short time. The reasons contests are great for working more QSOs and rare locations is there's a high activity level with a higher density of stations on multiple bands. Some bands and modes are mainly on only during contest. So for example, I'm going to be talking about using FT8 on 2 meters during the VHF UHF contest. That's about the only time you're going to hear FT8 activity on 2 meters. So if you miss the contest, you're probably not going to have many opportunities to work that particular mode and band. Also, some of the best stations with the best operators, receiving antennas, listening skills are listening for you, so your weak signals will get work even when you may not realize it. I was working VHF UHF contest a number of years ago. I made a contact on 6 meters with a station in Virginia, and he asked me to try 440, and I said, I'm not going to be able to make it there. I just have a very simple antenna here. He said, give it a try, and he worked me. I found out later they had stacked Yagis on a mountain top down in Virginia, and it was all them, it wasn't me. Reasons contests are great for working more QSOs in rare locations is other stations want to work you, and they're highly motivated to work you to get contest points. Other hams appreciate the contacts you provide, especially if you're a new multiplier. And we'll talk about multipliers a little bit later. The only thing you need to do is before jumping into the contest, make sure you know your exchange. And I have information here on a link you can click for information on exchanges. It's going to be really simple for the VHF UHF contest because most of these are simply going to be your grid square. And we'll talk more about that. Some other reasons they're great. They allow you to evaluate your station's performance. You can experience and learn about propagation effects. And you can choose how much time you want to spend. You can invest just a little bit of time, or you can go full time BIC, which means butt in the chair, and get as much time in as possible. You can send in a log or not. It's your choice. Don't worry, the other stations won't get dig points if you don't send a log in, so it's totally up to you. We're going to be talking about getting on the air. We're not worried too much about winning, so sending in a log is not that important. But you never know, you might want to send a log in. One year I was in Albuquerque on a Sunday afternoon waiting to go to a conference the next week, and I had my Yaesu FT8 a small portable radio, and a rubber duck for 6 meters. And everyone knows how ineffective rubber ducks are. But I was able to go up on the 3rd floor balcony of the hotel using the balcony and the railings as reflectors and directors. I worked all the way to St. Louis from Albuquerque, worked about 20 stations, sent in my log, and lo and behold, I got first place QRP in the New Mexico section for that year. Something that's different about radio sport contesting as opposed to other sports is we get to pick what field we want to play on. So we can choose contests that match our interest, our favorite modes, our operating skills, the radio equipment and antennas we have, and the level of competitiveness we want. There's no one contest is the same. All the contests are very different. You can also choose contests that favor your geographic locations, specific bands, specific modes, increasing your worked all states, grid squares, etc., or winning and finishing in a top spot. Just like in other sports, you need a program to know what's going on, and what you need for contesting is you need a contest calendar. There's three main contest calendars I'm going to be talking about. Probably the most comprehensive is the WA7 BNM contest calendar. You can go out to that and you can see what contests are coming up in a given week, or you can look for a month. You can look for specific types of contests. You can see all the contests that are available. If we look at the 5-week forecast for contests, we'll see that the ARRL VHF UHF contest is right here at the bottom. When we click on that, we would see more information, including when the contest is, with the times, who you can work, what the exchange is, what type of categories they have, where you can find the full rules, and the future dates of the contest. So June 10th is the date you want to mark on your calendar. June 8th through 10th is the date you want to mark on your calendar for the next running of this. This one down here, the N2SLN calendar, has some things that other calendars don't have. It's a VHF contest and activity calendar. So there's not only contests, but there's some other reoccurring events that are activities in different areas. And you might want to check this out if it happens to be in your specific area of the country. So as far as technicians, there are 6 contests that I would say are prime for technicians. 4 of them are VHF, UHF contests. The other 2, one is in December. It's a 10-meter contest, 10-meter only. So you can definitely work in that. You can work voice, you can work CW, you can work digital, anything you want to as a technician that you have privileges for. The other one is Field Day, which is coming up also in June. But the other 4 contests are VHF, UHF contests in June, July, December, and January. The links for each of these are right here. You can click them for more information. Now, let's talk about VHF, UHF contesting specifically. In many ways, VHF contesting is very similar to HF contesting, with quick exchanges, points awarded per contact, multipliers, which are usually grid squares in a VHF, UHF contest. In other contests, it might be things like states or countries, but in most of these contests, it's going to be grid squares. And when I'm talking about grid squares, I'm talking about the first 4 characters. So I would be Echo November 91, EN91 here. And I'll tell you how you can find your grid square in a few moments. There's really a variety of modes: single sideband, CW, FT8 and FT4, and some FM activity, which we'll be talking about. To find your grid square, you can click on this link that has information on finding grid squares. And once you get out there, you can see that I have information explaining what the grid square system is, showing how that's actually 8 characters long, but we're only going to be using the first 4, which is the largest of the measurements. It tells you how to find your grid square. And when you do that, it will also tell you other hams in your area. So when you find your grid square using one of these tools, it'll show the other hams that are in that grid square. So lots of information. Here's an overview map of grid squares. You can see EN is the northern midwestern portion of the country. FN is mostly New England. FM is just part of the East Coast and the South. EL is Florida and the Gulf Coast. EM is most of the rest of the South. DM is most of the desert Southwest. DN is most of the northern part of the Northwest. And Oregon and Northern California and Washington are in CN, and CM is on part of California. So that's just a general idea of how the grid squares are laid out. Oh, by the way, they move from west to east, so C, D, E, and N, and they move from south, with 0 being down here, to the east and to the north. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 9. Then it starts with 10 and goes back up again. But all you need to worry about is your grid square and then copying the other stations. VHF contests typically allow choosing which mode you want to use on each band. But for each station you work, you can only work them once per band, not per mode, but once per band total. So if I work Barry on 6 meters, single sideband, I can't work Barry on 6 meter FT8 for points later on, or 6 meter CW, because I've already worked Barry on 6 meters. Now, unless one of 2 things happen, I can't work Barry again. I can work Barry again if he's on another band, or I can work him again if he changes grid squares. And some people are rovers and move around and do change grid squares. I could also work them again if I change my grid square if I was a rover. So unless people move around, it's one contact per band per station, no matter which mode you choose. And there's no difference. You can choose any of the three modes you want: voice, digital, or CW. Another difference with VHF UHF contesting is something called QSYing. And this is often confusing for people the first time they're operating in a VHF UHF contest. It's not something that happens very often in HF contest. Basically what happens is after you work a station on one band, they will ask you, what other bands do you have? And if you say that you have certain other bands, what they will do is they will then ask you to QSY to a different band. They'll give you a frequency to go to. So let's say I make a contact on 6 meters, another station asks me which other bands I have. I say, I have 2 meters and I have 430. So he might say, okay, let's QSY to 144.220 single sideband. I would move up there, work them. If we make contact, then we would move to the next band and so forth. If you don't want to do that, or if you only have one band available, or if you don't feel comfortable with QSY, you can always say, sorry, no other bands available to QSY to. So it does involve a little more talking in HF than an HF contest. It's also a little friendlier, a little more laid back than most of the HF contest. Most of the time people work up, but if you would bump into someone for the first time on 430 and they ask you what other bands you have, you might start back on 6 or on 2, whatever bands you have. There's no specific order you have to work them in. This is just a list of all the activities I mentioned earlier. Let's talk about some myths about contesting. Potential and beginner contesters may encounter a number of myths about contesting. The first myth is often it's all about the equipment. The second one is my VHF radio antenna is not good enough or new enough for contesting. The next myth is you can't contest with FM. You need an amplifier to contest, and you need a tower and a beam to contest. So let's bust some of those myths. Even the simple or older radios can still make contacts. I would actually say you're much better off with a radio you know how to operate that's older than a new fancy radio that you don't know how to operate. It's not the equipment, it's how you use the equipment. Read the manuals, watch videos, so you know how to effectively and efficiently operate all of your equipment. The largest number of contacts are on FT8 and FT4, single sideband, and then CW, but there is some FM activity, especially in larger population centers. It is simplex only, no repeaters. So if you only have FM, you can still get on during VHF, UHF contest, but you will have less stations to work, but that's not a problem. Another myth busting is contests are separate competitions in different categories, so using an amplifier puts you in a different operating category. Good antennas always help, even more in VHF and UHF contests, but they're not a panacea. A simple dipole or vertical can still make lots of contacts. Now, one of the things we told you about when we were talking about antennas a couple weeks ago is you want to have your antenna oriented in the same way as the other station you're working. So if your antenna is vertically polarized, you want both stations to be vertically polarized. But what I did tell you then also was if you don't have the same thing, try it anyway. Your signal will be reduced, but you can still make contacts. So the only antenna I currently have up for VHF and UHF is a diamond vertical up on my roof. I still make single sideband contacts. I still make digital contacts. So don't think just because you only have one antenna that you can't make contacts. Some other myths: new operators cannot win contests. There's way too much to learn. If I don't finish in first place, there's no benefit for me in contesting. We can bust those really quick. We already actually have in some ways. With so many contests and categories available, even newbies can finish first in their category or at least place in the top 10. And that's always my goal. I'm not worried about winning the contest. I'm just trying to get in the top 10. There are lots of resources for new contesters to learn more, and you don't need to know it all to get started. And I'll give you a number of resources at the end tonight. The next myth busting is many operators enter contests to pursue awards, improve operating skills, or to just have fun. So what do you need to get started contesting? Well, you need a radio and an antenna or antennas. You need some basic operating skills. A list of available contests, well, I already told you where to find that. You need a way to log your contacts. Although paper logs are still acceptable for some contests, computer contest logging is the preferred method, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. For more information on antennas, go to the RATPAC presentation from a couple weeks ago that Marty and I put together. You can watch the YouTube video, or you can view the slideshow for more information. Now let's talk about radios. For 2 meter and 75 centimeter radios for contesting. If you have an FM only radio, even your HT, you can get on the air and make contacts. There might not be as much activity available, especially if you're not near an urban center, as there will be with single sideband digital and CW, but that doesn't mean that there won't be no activity. And if you don't get on the air, I can guarantee you won't make any contacts. So get on the air, give it a try. One thing you need to be is not shy, because if you're on FM, once you pick a frequency, if you don't hear anyone, you want to call CQ. Because if everyone's listening and no one's calling C, no one will find anyone. So I'll talk about the frequencies in a few minutes. But remember, you need to both listen for other stations calling CQ, and you need to spend some time CQing. And the good news is, on VHF and UHF FM, their frequencies are not so crowded that you can't hold on to a frequency even with a minimal station. Whereas on HF, it's very difficult to do that without a great station. The next type of radio is a VHF, UHF multi-mode, multi-band radio. This is a radio that covers 2 meters, 440, maybe 1.2 gigahertz, maybe other bands. The third option is to buy an HF radio that has VHF and UHF included, something like the Yaesu FT991 or the ICOM 705. So here's some radios and some different information. So if you have an FM only radio, which are widely available and inexpensive, there's a number of them available, preferably a mobile as opposed to an HT with a little more power and a better antenna. The only mode though you'll be able to work is FM only. So the number of QSOs will be somewhat limited. If you are able to work with a multi-mode radio, your number of modes goes way up. Single sideband, CW, FM, and digital are all available to you if you have a multi-mode radio. You can't run digital FT8 or FT4 on an FM radio. You need a radio that has single sideband capability. So that rules out with your FM mobile radio or your HT. Now, you can go out and buy a new radio. Current production radios there's limited models available. There's only one 100 watt high power radio available for VHF and UHF, and that is the ICOM 9700, about $1,700 new. The good news is, though, there's a ton of discontinued and used radios available. Everything going back to the old ICOM vertical 202, 2 meter single sideband radio, single band, single mode radio, actually, single sideband only. So if you click on this link, it'll take you to a web page that has a number of radios that are available for for multi-mode operation on VHF and UHF. You notice the ICOM 9700 is the only one that's currently available, and I show you what frequencies it has. You'll notice that there's a ton of disconnected stations though available out there, and you can pick these up rather inexpensively. Some of these are VHF, UHF only. Some are multi-mode VHF, UHF plus HF, and there's a number of them available. Some of them are lower powered radios, some are higher powered radios. I started off with a Yaesu FT 221R single sideband radio. Here's a picture of it. And I started out with a homebrew antenna made out of a 2x2 piece of wood about 8 foot long with aluminum elements that I put into it, and I had it hanging from the ceiling of my second floor bedroom, and I was able to spin it around using a fishing line swivel, and I was able to work from Akron into Fort Wayne, Indiana, on single sideband 2 meter. So I was real excited about that. The other option, as I mentioned earlier, is to get an HF radio that also has VHF and UHF. Again, the number is pretty limited. New models available: the 991, the ICOM 7100, not the 7300, the 7100, and the ICOM 705. The 705 is a QRP radio, so it's 10 watts maximum. There's a ton of them that are also available that are discontinued. Again, looking at our chart here, you'll see the 3 current models I talked about. Here's what the ICOM 701 looks like, by the way, if you're not familiar with it. It is a radio, of course. ICOM just changed a bunch of their links. This is what it looks like. It's a mobile radio with a separate head on it, but you can certainly use it as a base unit. Covers all the HF bands plus 2 meters and 440. It even has D-Star on it in addition to all the other modes, single sideband CW on VHF and UHF. It also has D-Star, so about $1,200. You might find one in the used market also. But you'll also notice there's a bunch of discontinued radios. The very popular ICOM 857 and 897, the portable QRP versions, the 818 and 817, are all radios that you can use very easily on VHF and UHF. This is what I was using for my contacts in Albuquerque. And I was actually using the rubber duct that attaches to the BNC right here. So, to review your choices, if you have an FM only radio, you'll only be able to operate FM. But if you can get a multi-mode VHF, UHF radio, it'll give you access to all of the modes and all of the available contacts. Now, fortunately, 6 meters is very easy to come by because if you buy an HF radio that was built in the last 20 years, it probably has 6 meters included. So 6 meters is very available. And you can pick up a used radio, you can pick up a new radio, there's tons of radios available. Most of the activity on 6 meters is going to be on FT8 and FT4 with a little bit on single sideband and a little bit on CW. But it's a great band to use year-wide, not just during the contest. So having 6 meter capability can be great. If you're interested in operating FT8 and FT4, I have a whole presentation with more information on that. When you are buying a radio, though, if it's an older radio, it might not have an internal sound card. So you might need to purchase an external sound card interface, such as a USB, Tigertronic Signalink or the DigiRig Mobile, a very inexpensive little thing. And again, all that information is in the FT8, FT4 presentation about how to set up and operate those modes. Before you start the contest, you need to read the rules for each contest. They are different. Know the dates and times. Remember, the times are usually shown in UTC, so make sure you're converting to the right time before you know what time you're going to start the contest. And keep your log in UTC also. Do not keep your log in local time, but make sure you know what the local time is for starting the contest and ending the contest. It'll also tell you what bands and frequencies you can work, who you can work, how the scoring works, etc. Make sure you know your exchange and have your station ready. So let's talk about the frequencies for VHF, UHF contesting. The FM simplex frequencies, the suggested frequencies are listed here by band. You can see 6 meters FM simplex, 2 meters FM simplex. There's actually 2 sets on 6 meters, 70 centimeter, and 1.2 gigahertz. Some of the contests do not allow you to call on the national calling frequency, so just be aware of that. If that's one of the rules, that means you have to not use that specific simplex frequency, the denoted national calling frequency. When you're putting the frequency in your radio, make sure it doesn't automatically assign a plus or minus shift to that frequency, because these are all simplex. You don't want to use 2 frequencies. You want to be on the frequency that you set. You don't want the radio to change frequencies when you transmit. And again, no repeaters. Now, 2 meter simplex frequencies are spaced in different ways in different parts of the country. The eastern part of the country uses 15 kilohertz split settings between each of the frequencies. Most of the West, except for California, uses 20. The good news is, if you look at this chart, you'll see that there's frequencies in green. Those are available in both the 20 kilohertz and the 15 kilohertz splits. So I suggest you use those frequencies during the contest, the ones that are in green. Put those in the memories of your radio, and that way you can just click, click, click. You can listen, you can call, and they're right there ready to go. The other 2 meter frequencies for single sideband, 144.1 to 144.278, but most of the activity is in a rather narrow range, right above 144.195 up to about 144.220 or 225. CW, even a very smaller, narrower range. Digital, FT4 and FT8. Most stations will be using FT8, but check FT4, and actually FT4 is much more convenient for quicker contacts. Remember, there's a band plan that will just pick a random frequency somewhere, use the suggested simplex frequencies and the suggested single sideband and CW frequencies that I have here. For 6 meters, there are 11 simplex frequencies counting the national calling frequency. They are in 2 batches, the 51 and the 52 megahertz sections. Just put all these into your memory and you can click through all 11 of those and be ready to go. For 6 meter single sideband, 5.110 to 5.124 is reserved for DX calling only, so you should not be calling there. You can listen and you can answer a DX station, but you should not be calling there. Most of the activity hangs around 50.125 and up. Most of it's between 50.125 and 50.250, but you can go all the way up to 300, so check up there also. There's no channelization, so it can be anywhere. They might be on 50.127.823 or whatever. So just tune them in where they're at. CW, very narrow range. Below 80.81, you'll hear a bunch of CW signals, but they're beacons, so don't try and call them. They won't answer you. Most of the activity is in this very narrow little range. Digital, there are 2 sets of digital frequencies for 6 meters. The primary, which are the ones listed on the left here, and the secondary, when the band gets busy, shown on the right. So start out with these ones on the left, but check the ones on the right if they get busy. 70 centimeters, single sideband and CW are pretty much in the same area at 432.1 to 432.3. Most of the activity is right around 432.1 to 1.1. Digital, not widely used. You're very unlikely to hear people there. You're much more likely to hear people on 2 meter FT8 than you will on FT8 on digital, and FT4 you're probably not going to hear anyone. FM simplex for the 70 meter frequencies can be problematic because it varies by geographic location. I'm going to suggest you check these 8 frequencies out, these 7 frequencies, but listen on them for a while before the contest to check to make sure they're not repeater inputs in your area. But these are the most commonly used frequencies. If you're not sure about your area, see if you can find your local, your state or section frequency coordinators information and see if there are repeaters in your area on any of these frequencies. You can also go to any repeater manual and just look these up and see whether there's anything in your area. There's not a lot of FM simplex activity during VHF, UHF contests. You're much better chances on 2 meters than you are on 440. For all the bands, some tips. On FM simplex, put the simplex frequencies into your radio's menu in groups by band. Then you can simply click through them. Make a cheat sheet showing the list of memories, so if you are QSYing to a different band, you'll know which memory to tune to for that particular frequency that you want. On USB and CW, put frequencies in the memories for quicker QSYing. So pick a frequency, and then you can always tune away from it once you get there, but that will let you change quickly to be in the ballpark of the QSY frequencies. On digital, don't forget to change the settings, and I'll show you how to do this a little later, but you need to change the settings in WSJTX to be in contesting mode. Also, remember to check FT8, FT4 in addition to FT8, especially on 6 meters. Now, there's 2 ways to initiate a contest during a contact. First one is calling CQ, also known as running. You pick one frequency, you keep working station after station, you keep calling CQ. The other method is the search and pounce, going through all the frequencies, hunting for stations, and then answering the calling stations. The best suggestion is a mix of both, and as I said, you can get away with this on VHF and UHF. It's hard to do on HF unless you have a really strong station to hold on to a calling frequency, CQing frequency, but you can do it very easily on FM, VHF, UHF, because there's not that many stations and there's a lot of space. In addition to exchanging call signs, most contests have what's called an exchange. The exchange provides a piece of information about the station being contacted. The easy thing is most of the exchanges in the VHF, UHF contest are the grid square. So if I would contact someone, I would say, you're 59, Echo November 91 on voice, and they would answer back 59 FN 33 or whatever grid they're in. By the way, the signal report on contest is going to be 59 no matter what. Please don't use anything other than 59. If it's CW, you can use 5N to abbreviate the 9, but no one's expecting real signal reports. This is more information on exchanges, but the only thing you really need to worry about the contest I was talking about are the grid squares. And here's more information on grid squares, how to find them, a bunch of different things. You can get an app for your phone and know exactly which grid square you're in. There's more information on different types of sections, zones, etc. Not really applicable to VHF, UHF contesting. So here's a typical contest. CQ contest, November 0, Lima, Lima. CQ contest, November 0, Lima, Lima. So I hear him call and I answer back, Kilo 8, Zulu Tango. And he answers, Kilo 8, you're 59, Echo Mike 09. Roger, 59, Echo November 91. Notice I'm using phonetics, another station is using phonetics to make it clear. Thank you, QRZ and 0LL. And he goes on and works the next station. Or he might ask, do you have other bands? Or do you want a QSY? And if you say yes, he'll give you a frequency to QSY to, and then you go there and you make a contact. CW, very similar, but even less, more streamlined. I mentioned you need to make a change in your settings on FT8 and FT4. You need to go into Settings, click on the Advanced tab, click on the Special Operating Activity, and choose NA VHF, and then down here put the contest name in, just the short name of it, so like the ARRL contest, just ARRL. For the CQ, when you'd put in CQ, WW, and so forth. And check this box down here, so when you're calling CQ, it'll say CQ ARRL contest, and people know you're in the contest. This will also mean that you will send an exchange of not a signal report, but a grid square. So it just makes it a little more streamlined, and the station will get their grid square. How do you find stations to work? Well, check the rules for suggested frequencies. Take a look at the chart I showed you earlier in this presentation. And then choose the band corresponding to contacts to target geographic area. But if you have it available, use online spotting. Use a DX cluster to find out when stations are being spotted. Now, the ARRL rules for assistance in VHF, UHF contesting spotting is very different than HF. You're allowed to use chat rooms, social media, texting, phone calls, APRS, self-spotting, etc. to contact people and say, hey, would you work me? You can also use different online sites like Ping Jockey, VHF Chat Slack, ON4KST. These are all chat places where people go on and say, I'm on 1.2 gigahertz at such and such a frequency, please call me. Now, remember though, even though you can use these for assistance in starting the contact, you must make the entire contact and all necessary exchanges on the air for it to count. So you can't make the contact on chat. Before you make your first transmission, make sure you know what your exchange is, what frequency and mode limits of your license. Make sure you can copy the other station's call sign before you call them. Don't call them and then ask them what their call sign is. And then listen to how other stations are responding to the calling station. I can skip this for VHF, UHF. The next thing you need to know is whether they copied you or not. If they ask you a question like call, that means they want you to repeat your call sign. They didn't get it. If they say again or repeat, they want you to repeat whatever you said. If they ask for section, that means they didn't get your section. Well, in this case, they're going to ask for grid. That means they didn't get your grid square. How do you know if they worked you? They'll say things like, thank you, Roger, QSL, 73, okay, or other affirmatives. The problem comes in when you're not sure if the station's got the information. So if the station calling CQ is having a problem with your call, and they come back and give you your call sign. So someone comes back and says, K8NRC, what should I do? What I should not do is I should not say K8NRC because he had it right. I'll just confuse him. What I want to do is confirm that by saying Roger, Roger, okay, yes, or something along those lines. So if a station repeats information to you that's correct, just Roger it or acknowledge it. Don't give it again. That just confuses them if you give it again. If they have it wrong, consider giving it, then you need to tell them no and then give it again the right way. If they're having a problem with a phonetic, try using a different phonetic for the missing letters. You can use your voice and your cadence to emphasize certain things and make it clear for contesting. And again, if everything is correct and they ask you to confirm it, just give them a Roger, Roger, QSL, 73, whatever you want to do, okay. If it's wrong, say no, negative, etc., and give them the right information. So what's next? After your first contact, continue to make additional contacts. Some contacts act as multipliers. So in the VHF, UHF contest, each new grid square you work will be a multiplier, and each new grid square you work on each band will be a multiplier. So what you want to do is go forth and work more multipliers to increase your final score. Now, I mentioned logs. Paper logs were the norm for years, but contesters got the great idea of let's start doing logs with computers. It's faster, it's easier, it does a better job. So computer software is very popular. N1MM is a free piece of software for contesting that works in the VHF, UHF contest in addition to the HF contest. Here's a number of contesting software available. This is from the CQ Worldwide, but it also these also work VHF, UHF, and if you have a Macintosh or Linux computer, I have information on my website. But my suggestion is buy a cheap Windows computer and run N1MM or run N3FJP. These are my two top suggestions. Get it installed, get used to it, and learn how to use it. Make sure it's interfaced with your radio. That'll make it a lot more effective. And I have a whole presentation on logging software, both general and contesting. You can go to the slideshow and view that. Some tips for newer contesters. Make sure you read and understand the rules. Know your exchange before the contest. Know the CQing station's call sign before answering. CQ QSOs should be kept streamlined. Send only what is required in exchange. Avoid excessive information. Avoid filler words like my grid square is. You don't need to say that. When you give your grid square, they'll know it's a grid square. Repeat only the requested information. Now, I have a whole presentation on timing and how to make contacts called how to make that QSO, get in the rhythm, know the rhyme, and dance the dance. You can watch that and view the slideshow. When you're ready to enter the contest, if you want to enter it, most of the time it's done with a software generated log. It's called a Cabrillo file or a .log file, and I have plenty of information in that in the resources. I'm not going to recover that right now. How do you find out how you did in the contest? Well, you have to wait until the information comes out. This weekend, they finally published the results of the December ARRL 160 contest. So that gives you an idea of how long it takes. So it takes a while to find out. So what a lot of people do is they post their score to a website called 3830. It's the contest rumor site, and you can go there and post your information. So I posted my information earlier in the week for the contest I worked. I worked the Delaware QSO party, and you can see that I reported that I made 4 contacts on phone, 4 contacts on CW, and I had 1,080 points, so it looks like I'm in 4th place. Now, this isn't official because people may not put their information here. It's not official until they go through and give you the log information, but this will give you an idea of how you did and other stations that were involved in that particular contest. Let's see. I also did the 7th Area Call District. And I have a whole presentation on how to use this website also on in my presentations. Here's the link to that presentation. Now, unfortunately, winning even the largest contest doesn't get you big money awards. Contests are usually limited to either a trophy or plaque for first places and certificates for other accomplishments. So here's a first place plaque that I got a few years back. On the single sideband in the CQ Worldwide, and here's a certificate from the 160 contest. So the rest of the information I have are contest resources. I have an introduction to amateur radio contesting that I did for RATPAC. You can watch the video, go to the slideshow. And if you're an ARRL member, you can go to the Learning Center and take the class that I wrote on Introduction to Amateur Radio Contesting. K5ND has another resource on VHF, UHF contesting. You can go there. He has a number of resources and information on VHF, UHF contesting clubs, magazines, presentations, blog posts, etc., etc. Also, he has a great free book that you can download on 6 meters. You just click on that little download link and it will download the Magic Band book. And it is a nice little book and it is free. It's about 120 pages long. I also have this information on logging I talked about earlier. There's a book called Big Amateur Radio Contesting for Beginners by Doug Grant, K1DG. And then there's different material you can sign up to receive. The ARRL contest update, which comes out bi-weekly, contesting.com mailing list, ARRL online group on contesting, and a Facebook group, Contesting in DX. There's a bunch of resources, including a bunch of YouTubes. Dave Kassler asked the question, must I submit a contest log if I make contacts? We can watch the video because it's really good, but I can give you the answer right now. You do not need to submit a log for the other station to get credit, so don't worry about that. If you're new to VHF and UHF, Marty and I did a whole presentation over 5 weeks of video, 5 hours of video that we did for RATPAC over 4 weekends, 4 weeknights, and there's a slideshow to go along with it of about 200 and some slides. So that brings us to the end. You can shoot this QR code to get this presentation, or you can go to tiny.cc VHF UHF contest. I'll put that in the chat, and I will be happy to take questions, comments, suggestions. So let's see. So Barry sent me his grid square in chat. Thank you, Barry. And yeah, and the other thing Dave mentioned, that when they want the contest file, they do not want an ADIF file. They want a Cabrillo file. And I explained that in detail in my introduction to contesting and in the contesting online class. So make sure you take a look at those for more information on contesting.
There's one other resource you didn't mention, Anthony.
Yes.
Publish the National Contest Journal.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. The National Contest Journal, if you're an ARRL member, you can go to the website and read it. You don't have to actually get the paper one, and it's a very good, and my name is in there twice the last month. So yes, make sure you take a look at the National Contest Journal. It's a bi-monthly or is it quarterly? I think it's bi-monthly.
It's bi-monthly.
Okay, very good. So we can open up, if you have any questions, raise your hand and we'll be happy to acknowledge you and try and answer your question. Or you can put it in chat and Barry will let me know that there's a message. So I see that Gene has his hand up. Gene, go ahead.
Yes, QRP is pretty much a given, but are there usually other RF out limitations as far as the maximum
It depends
power
on the
that you can
contest. Some
produce?
contests distinguish between 100 watts is low power and a kilowatt is high power. So there's usually three power classifications.
Okay, now I've seen some people say 5 watts is QRP. I've seen some people say 20.
5 watts is QRP. Just there's a few exceptions, but if you go by 5 watts, you'll never be wrong.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. There's also other categories too. There's a rover category for people that are moving around. There's categories for people that just work one band. There's categories for FM only. So there's a number of different categories if you go to the ARRL website and look at the results for the contest. Let me just bring that up here real quick while we're waiting for the next question. So other questions? So while I'm waiting for more questions, if you go to the ARRL website and you sign in, I don't think you have to sign in to get all the information, but we'll do that anyway. So I'm signed in. If you go to the On the Air tab at the top and you go to contesting, it has information on these different resources I talked about earlier, the newsletters, etc. but you can go to the contesting portal, and when you go there, you can see all the contests. So the contest we're talking about is the June VHF UHF. If you go up to the top and you go to the information at the top, it'll give you, I'm sorry, it's right here. It'll give you the article, the scores, the logs received, and if we go there, we can see the scores. So they have classic rover, limited rover, unlimited rover, single operator high power, single operator low power, analog only, FM only. So if you do FM only, you have a category that's for FM only. Single operatable portable, single operator 3-band. So there's a number of different categories available in the contest. They're there. Other questions? Anyone out there already a VHF UHF contester?
I visited a couple of club sites that are VHF, UHF contest pros. Those guys are absolutely incredible.
But they need people like us to make contacts with. So that's why I need you all to get on the air. Even if you just pull out your HT and put those simplex frequencies in it and give that a try, see if you can make some contacts. Again, it starts the evening of June. It's UTC June 8th through UTC June 10th. So it's the weekend of the 8th through 10th.
And if the propagation gods are good to us, you would be absolutely amazed what you can do with your handheld.
Yeah. And 6 meters was very open the last week. It's not been that great recently, but 6 meters was open to Florida from Ohio to the Caribbean. And actually, I even heard a Chilean station on 6 meter FT8 on Wednesday night. I guess Tuesday night.
Did you talk about gray line?
I'm sorry?
Gray line?
No, because it really doesn't have as much influence on this. There's other modes of propagation, and Marty and I talk about those in the VHF beginner's guide. So if you go there, things like tropospheric ducting and other phenomena, E-skip. So definitely take a look at the beginner's VHF UHF guide, and we talk about that in there extensively. Other questions, comments? Yeah, go ahead, Gene.
Yeah, one last question. When you start out in a contest, let's say you're using commercial power, whether it be from home or from a plug-in outlet out of the site, but you go to, after like several hours, you go to battery power. How does that change your logging?
In VHF UHF,
classifications?
there really is there is no power multiplier designation. If you're doing it for other contests, the way it works is if you use commercial power, you don't get credit for battery power. So if you're using battery power, it has to be through the whole contest. Or the same thing with the power, the same thing with your power level. So if you're running QRP for the first half an hour and you're running a kilowatt for the second hour and you're running low power for the rest of the contest, your category is the highest of the three, no matter what you operated when. So that's the way that any of those bonus points for like portable, for battery power, non-commercial power, power levels of operating, those all are based on the highest of the ones you've used during the time. So you can't claim half your contacts as one category and half your contacts as another.
Okay, hopefully I didn't miss it, but maybe I did. What about HF, or not HF, but SAT contacts during VHF and UHF?
Nope, no repeaters of any type.
Satellite?
Nope, they're considered a repeater.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep. Now there are satellite activities out there. If you go to the VHF, UHF satellite activities, there are satellite activities. For field day, satellite contacts do count as a bonus point, and you can use them for field day. But for the VHF, UHF contest, no, it's all simplex activity. No relays, no repeaters, no satellites. Very good question. Other questions? Okay, well, I squeezed it in an hour, so Dan will be very proud of me. I told him we were going to cause havoc while he was gone, and look, we even got it done in less than an hour.